Put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen, for our presidential candidate, the Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and I appreciate that. Let me take this opportunity to first of all thank my colleagues for their presentations. And I think from what you have heard, this is truly going to be a partnership where all of us will be given an opportunity to contribute to the development and to the governance of this nation. Friends, let me say it is a pleasure to welcome you all to the launch of the joint manifesto of the National Alliance, the United Republican Party, the National Rainbow Coalition, and the Republican Congress Party of Kenya. When we launched our coalition, we promised to go to the people and to seek their views on the content of this manifesto. In keeping with our motto, tunaamini kusema na kutenda, we have done just that. Unlike other manifestos, ours is not a dormant or lifeless write-up destined for safe storage away from wananchi scrutiny. Rather, it is a living document whose evolution is set to benefit from the contribution of every Kenyan. We believe in the spirit of our people, their ability, their hope, and desire for a better future. And their commitment to this future if given an opportunity. The Jubilee Coalition has come together because we believe in Kenya, and we stand here united by our vision and united for our country. We know that the challenges our people face are great, but we know that the opportunities for Kenya are greater still. We stand together to give our people the opportunity to make themselves as good as they can be. I want to just take a little moment to tell you how this coalition came into being. The Jubilee Coalition was not founded as a political outfit. On the contrary, it was born in the process of seeking a lasting solution to the violence that has racked our nation so often in the past. Mistrust, frustration, and anger has too often led to violence as different communities, worried about their future, have fought each other over resources and access to power. More often than not, this has been fueled by politicians in their quest for political office and power. Since the advent of multi-party politics in Kenya in 1992, we have seen a cycle of violence that has led to death and destruction of property, peaking every 5 years. The most serious occurrence of this violence was witnessed in the 2007 election, when over 1,300 Kenyans lost their lives and over 300,000 were forced to flee their homes. This trauma, the trauma of this cycle of violence, has dominated our national dialogue ever since. This violence, ladies and gentlemen, must end. Our nation must heal, and our people must come together with the realization that, as difficult as it may seem, we do need each other. The solution should be obvious to all, and we must learn to live with one another, trust one another, respect one another as Kenyans. This year, ladies and gentlemen, marks 50 years since the birth of our nation. This is our Jubilee year. And as the Bible tells us, the year of Jubilee is the year of healing and forgiveness. It is the year of renewal. My brother William Ruto and I were once on opposite sides, but we did indeed agree that we need to put our differences aside and come together as leaders to end this cycle of violence and bring enduring peace. And this has been our Jubilee journey. We have had meetings, and we started with small meetings. These meetings have grown, and they led to others, and then to public rallies, where we prayed together and publicly asked communities to forgive one another and to move on, to respect one another, and not ever slip back to the dark days of violence. The overwhelming support we received in this endeavor is manifested in the fact that people returned to their land and were welcomed back. The businesses that had closed were reopened, and communities have started to mend the bridges and repair the relationships that were fractured as a result of the violence. It was in the process of achieving these milestones that a political alliance was forged, not with the interest of power, but built on the common understanding and commitment to build a united Kenya. We do not imagine that we can dispel all ethnic tension and violence overnight, but we must stay the course because we believe in Kenya. We believe in Kenya, and we believe in the spirit of that Kenya, and that is the spirit in which we adopted our new constitution. Our nation has made progress in implementing that constitution, strengthening the rule of law, reforming the judiciary over the last few years, and as a Jubilee coalition, we shall continue to lend our unwavering support to these reforms that are so vital to peace and stability in our country. That peace and stability has been tested in the past, oftentimes needlessly. I do not intend to continue to discuss our nation solely in the context of the challenges that we have faced, but instead, I propose to offer solutions that will create opportunities that will help us overcome our difficulties. We need, ladies and gentlemen, to break from the past. It is now time to consign the days of strife to history, and that is why we have formed this coalition. We know that we have created the right team to not only make Kenya Vision 2030 a reality, but also to deliver accelerated economic growth, higher living standards, and more jobs. More importantly, the coalition is dedicated to radically address the inexcusable poverty and inequality that exists in our country today. The Jubilee Coalition is more than a political grouping. It is actually a national movement for peace, unity, development, and transformative leadership for the people of Kenya. Kenya has arrived at a turning point in our history, and it is time to fully embrace our destiny. It is time to rededicate ourselves to the task of nation building, and to the pursuit of the promise that hard work, discipline, and action will bring a life of prosperity, dignity, peace, harmony, and plenty within our borders. Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed time to renew Kenya. A renewed Kenya where we celebrate our diverse cultures and history. A renewed Kenya where we forge a new future of peace, unity, and tolerance. A renewed Kenya where we shed our history of ethnic tension and social division. A renewed Kenya where all of us, irrespective of who we are, whatever our ethnic or religious identity, whether men or women, whether young or old, we all put our country first. This is the future we aim to build, a place where we all live as one people in one nation. Ladies and gentlemen, we will build on the successes, especially in economic growth seen in recent years under His Excellency President Kibaki's government. Through the building of infrastructure such as roads, fiber optic cables, electricity, and water supplies. The President has delivered vast improvements in our nation's hardware. However, our mission is to ensure that every Kenyan shares in that growth. Our mission is to build our nation's software. The measure of our success will not just be how much wealth we create, but how many benefit from it. We all talk of unity and umoja, but that needs to be more than just a word. If we as Kenyans are to build the kind of society that we want our children to inherit, then it must become a way of life. A society where every citizen, whoever they are, wherever they live, will have the same opportunity to succeed and prosper, free of discrimination, open or hidden. Our coalition is a symbol of the change we will bring in Kenya. That change must transform the lives of ordinary Kenyans by giving them the means to help themselves, empowering them to make the choices they want about their own lives. In order to do so, there are serious issues that we must address. And first amongst these is the land question. It has been a running sore that has poisoned relations between communities, prompting suspicion and driven dispute, and even been used as a political weapon. When our opponents seek short-term political advantage, we as a Jubilee coalition seek to provide long-term solutions. Land is always seen as a source of problems in Kenya, when it can instead be a tool which we use to create wealth and opportunity for all Kenyans. The time has come, my fellow Kenyans, for us to settle this issue and to end the discord and argument. For too long now in Kenya, we have talked about the land question. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we need to find the land answer. Fellow Kenyans, please allow me to dwell on this subject for a little while. You all know that when the colonial government established itself in Kenya, it created three categories of land ownership. First was the land taken by the colonial government for its own use, which was called Crown land. Second was the land given to settlers as private land. And lastly, what remained was assigned to Africans as native reserves. Back in 1954, under the Swinnerton Plan, some native reserves saw a process of adjudication, consolidation, and registration that gave titles to Africans. At independence, our government inherited Crown land and renamed it government land. Today, this accounts for 13% of our country's total landmass. Native reserves became trust land vested in local county councils. Even after independence, the settlers kept their land under private title or sold it to Africans on a willing buyer and willing seller basis. Today, private land is something bought and sold like any other commodity. Altogether, that private land accounts for 20% of our country's landmass. Land in those reserves that were not adjudicated and given back to Africans is now called community land under our new constitution, and is to be managed by the National Land Commission. This category of land presently accounts for 2/3 or 67% of the total land in Kenya. My fellow Kenyans, each one of these categories of land carries its own problems. Government land has often been poorly used and managed. As trustees of the nation's assets, the Jubilee government will reform its management and ensure that it is used in the public interest and for the benefit of all Kenyans. The second category of land, private land, suffers from subdivision and fragmentation, leading to smaller and smaller parcels being passed on to new buyers or successive generations. This has meant that in some parts of our country, land parcels have become so small that they are no longer viable for agriculture. The long-term economic consequence is that farmers can no longer support themselves or their families. In urban areas, overcrowded informal settlements or slums have grown, and this trend is now being reflected even in densely populated rural areas. As a government, we will provide wider economic opportunities so that people, especially in the rural areas, do not feel that the only way they can make a living is tilling even smaller parcels of land using a djembe and a panga. We aim to reverse the process of fragmentation and instead institute a process of reconsolidation that will create viable land holdings. While our policies will be deliberate, the process of reconsolidation will be voluntary and driven by the availability of better opportunities across the country. To ensure this happens, we will build spinal infrastructure such as roads, rail, water supply, electricity, and support new local centers where people can live and work. Our program for skills training and economic development will ensure that life on the land using modern mechanized farming methods is a matter of choice, not one of necessity. We will give new alternatives for our young to earn a living. Let me now turn to community land. Today, 60 years after the Swinnerton Plan was initiated, 67% of our land in Kenya has still not been adjudicated and has no title. It is community land, but those communities who live on it have no real rights. The only thing we have done is to change the name of that category of land and the bureaucracy that from time to time is responsible for its management. The truth is, there has been no fundamental attempt to answer the land question in Kenya since Swinnerton. For too long, the land debate has been about a small fraction of land, while in fact, 2/3 of our country is untitled and has remained unnoticed and never part of the debate. The new constitution recognizes that this is a problem, but it does not provide a solution. My government will be committed to finally giving the land answer. People living on community land suffer disadvantages not suffered by people living on their own land. They cannot unlock commercial value of that land. Public bodies are hampered from providing services as it is effectively no man's land. Individuals cannot invest and develop the land as they do not know whether one day they may be moved on. This insecurity means they cannot even invest in their own housing. Above all, they cannot raise capital or seek investment from others. We have turned them into squatters on their own land, and they are condemned to poverty, living in a kind of economic limbo. While those who have private titles are able to get credit, invest in their land, and consequently enjoy the phenomenal rise in value that we continue to witness. The existence of these different categories of land, private and community, has led to a skewed development across the country, with millions missing out on the benefits. Giving these people the right to own their land they live in will increase not only food production, but create more investment, improve housing and health outcomes. It will allow individuals to take charge of their own lives, rely on their own efforts, and it would minimize disputes over ownership between individuals, families, and communities. My government will be committed to giving people the title to their land. 60 years after Sweneton, Kenyans deserve to have this process completed. We will do this not just in the rural areas, but also in the urban areas, where informal settlements abound. When we look at the slums in our great cities, we see poverty. But it is time we saw the opportunities to generate wealth that lies therein. Take any slum, take Kibera for example, which has become famous for the depth of its poverty. Visitors to our country are often taken to Kibera to see the levels of deprivation and erosion of human dignity that its residents bear. Yet Kibera is some of the most valuable land in Nairobi. Rough estimates of its value put the worth of the area of land in Kibera at over 60 billion shillings. People are literally walking over 60 billion, which they own. Yet, they have been denied by their politicians the chance of unlocking that wealth because they have been denied the title to their land. My government will be committed to giving them the title to that land, which is key to unlocking the wealth of the people in Kibera. It will be the responsibility of my government to help organize the people of Kibera so that the community who own the land can reap its benefit, perhaps through local societies or community trusts, or directly as property owners. My government will work with the people of Kibera, who will be the owners of the land they live on, and with the financiers and developers to put up decent, high-rise, high-value homes and businesses, which the people of Kibera will own themselves and no one else. We will transform a slum into a thriving new community without a single eviction or compulsory demolition. This is the model we intend to use in other areas where people live in slums. With regard to the issue of squatters, my government will give them the right to their land as well, but we will work through the law and with the owners of the land to find appropriate compensation mechanisms for them. This will allow us to adjudicate that land and give rights to the squatters so that they have firm title too. For all those Kenyans who have been displaced, whether by violence or by government policy on forest conservation or inter-ethnic conflict, and have waited for a long time for their pleas to be answered, we hear you, and our government will accelerate and complete the resettlement efforts that are currently underway. To complete my program on land reform, we are committed to digitizing and decentralizing the land registry, to scrap such fees and other fees imposed by land tribunals. I believe that the government service for land should be free to the people of Kenya. The government should not place unnecessary roadblocks and obstacles to people doing transactions over their own land. I have taken time to give this matter the consideration it deserves, and I don't want to score any cheap political points. Indeed, I welcome ideas that will help resolve this issue from whatever source they come. Land was the basis on which the War of Independence was waged. It is too serious a matter to become a political football. Too much blood has been shed in this country for that. Politicians, especially those seeking the highest office in the land, should not use it as a stone to throw at one another. This issue requires serious, steady consideration and judgment, and answers designed to provide a long-term solution and not short-term political advantage. Ladies and gentlemen, the last 10 years has seen extraordinary change in Kenya. Just walk around Nairobi and you can see that construction is taking place on almost every corner. New cars crowd the streets. New malls are full of busy shoppers. A new generation has embraced technology and made our country a high-tech leader in Africa. However, ladies and gentlemen, there is another Kenya, one that is not shining, one where people are struggling every day to feed their families, sometimes going hungry themselves so that their children can eat. In this other Kenya, the last decade has not been so bright. A generation has grown up not knowing the dignity and sense of self-worth that a job brings. In this other Kenya, when the rains have failed to come, people have lost lives and livelihoods. In this other Kenya, mothers have seen their children die from diseases that we learned to cure decades ago. And Kenyans have had to suffer the indignity of queuing for relief food in order just to survive. So two Kenyans have grown up side by side. We have built islands of wealth in a sea of poverty, gated communities guarded by armies of security guards, looking out over the slums, where a lost generation of young people feel they have been forgotten by the country they love. In the villages, far beyond the end of the tarmac, there seemed to be no alternative to life. People have lived for over 1,000 years, struggling to survive, hoping to raise enough cattle or grow enough food just to feed their families. We cannot go on like this anymore, my fellow Kenyans. The task of the next government is to build one Kenya, not two Kenyas. One Kenya where all our citizens have opportunities to move ahead and to take control of their lives. The role of the government is to provide basic services such as infrastructure, to keep its people safe, to administer justice, and to provide a social safety net. But beyond this, our duty is to empower individuals, families, and communities, and to enforce the rules of fairness, and to give all Kenyans a chance to thrive and excel. The scourge of poverty and unemployment still stalks our nation, robbing millions of hope. Over 70% of our young people in Kenya do not have jobs. We need to create jobs for our people, jobs for our youth, and securing them will be my first priority as president. We want, ladies and gentlemen, a society where people are able to get jobs that enhance the dignity of the individual and allows them to provide for their families, creating self-reliant individuals who can engage with society rather than waiting for handouts. In order for us to do so, we need a serious government that puts in place economic foundations for growth. 10 years ago, our nation's budget was barely Kenya shillings 200 billion a year. Today, it stands at over Kenya shillings 1 trillion. And 95% of what we spend comes from here in Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a sign of what we can do, of what we can become as a nation. A strong, self-reliant nation, doing things for ourselves and not looking for others to do them for us. Today, we have the opportunity to rebuild the Kenyan economy so that it is fit to compete in the world. Our policies are designed to allow Kenyans of all ages, economic backgrounds, and communities to take part in the efforts to build that economy. Through these policies, this coalition will enable, inspire, and equip all Kenyans to stand tall and reclaim their dignity. Our government will be growth-led, focused on creating jobs for the millions of young people without work. And these will be real jobs with real prospects for the future. Kenyans Kenya must be at the heart of the growing East African economy, exporting goods to our neighbors and across the world. We need to attract new investors, both domestic and international, who will help create a manufacturing base that can employ our young men and women, and to give them the skills that they need to get ahead. Which is why we ask, do Kenyans spend billions of shillings a year on imported goods and services such as televisions, fridges, and cars, when so many of our people are unemployed? Why is it that other countries around the world, who 50 years ago were no wealthier than Kenya, are now economic powerhouses? Why is it that in South Korea, the youth and women receive training and support so that they can bid for government contracts, while here they struggle even to open the doors to a bank? We, as a people, can no longer afford to hobble through higher taxes, excessive bureaucracy, and corruption. We must seize the chance offered by the start of this African century to remake ourselves as an African lion economy. By building industries here at home, we can create the kind of economy that will generate 5 million new jobs over the next 5 years. We must grow Kenyan industry, both small and large, attracting foreign investment while at the same time mobilizing domestic resources, adding value to our products and mechanizing our agriculture, and improving access to markets for our agricultural produce. Our promises, ladies and gentlemen, are based on an understanding of the problems we face and a determination to deliver real results for every Kenyan. We do not, for 1 minute, claim that this will be easy. But to those who say we cannot achieve our objectives, I say we cannot afford not to try. For too long, we have watched the hopes and dreams of Kenyans turn to despair and then turned to violent ends. Our coalition will not stand idly by and watch the dreams of more Kenyans destroyed. That is why we, in our year of Jubilee, the year of renewal, pledge to transform Kenya into a nation of hope and opportunity. The goal of the Jubilee Coalition is an independent Kenya with a self-reliant people. My government will be committed to policies designed to give Kenya its place in the world as a leader in Africa and a partner around the globe. Africa, ladies and gentlemen, is at the cusp of a rebirth, a renewal that for the first time since the Europeans arrived, sees our continent driving the world economy. As recession bites across Europe and the West, and costs rise in China and the East, the world is at last turning its attention to Africa. Last year, 8 out of the top 10 fastest growing economies in the world were to be found on the African continent. Ladies and gentlemen, this provides us with a tremendous opportunity, an opportunity to transform the fortunes of millions of ordinary people across the continent, not least here at home in Kenya. It gives us the strength to make our own choices and decisions about our future. Kenya has long been a friend to the West, and we will always be, but the world also has become a global marketplace, and Kenya must find its place if we are not just to survive, but to grow and prosper. Kenya, ladies and gentlemen, can and must retain its old friendships, but we must forge new ones as well. In this, the 50th year of independence, we must have the faith in our own energies, our own creativity and talent to make our choices. Why did our fathers and mothers struggle for independence, if not to give us the opportunity to seize this moment? This can be the African century, Kenya's century, but only if we have the courage to rely on our own abilities, not just as individuals, but as a nation. When men and women come together in the future to write the history of this time, what will they say of our choices? Will they say that Kenyans turned away from facing down the challenges and sought to shelter in the arms of others? Or will they record that we seized this moment and indeed came of age? Will they say that we chose this moment to renew our country, or that we left the burdens on the shoulders of our children? I believe that the Kenyan people will make the right choice for themselves, their families, and indeed their country. I believe that the Jubilee Coalition will be ready to answer their call when they do. We in the Jubilee have audaciously reimagined a brand new Kenya. We have dared to dream afresh. In keeping once again with our motto, tunaamini kusema na kutenda, we have already made plans to act on day one to start transforming Kenya. In the first 100 days of the Jubilee government, we will take measures to make Kenya a fairer, healthier, and better educated country. One, we will release the money that has already been allocated to stock local health centers and dispensaries with drugs and equipment necessary to treat Kenyans when they fall ill. Two, we will abolish the fees that are currently charged when Kenyans go to public dispensaries and health centers for treatment. Three, we will abolish all fees for women giving birth at public hospitals. Four, we will pass legislation to ensure that no child is out of school or a training institution until they reach the age of 18. Five, we will provide every child entering Standard 1 in primary school with a solar-powered laptop, and we shall sustain this program for each succeeding year. And we shall sustain this program for each succeeding year until the day where every child in this country will walk with his bag and a laptop. These, ladies and gentlemen, are things we can do quickly. They are, in effect, a promissory note on the change that we will deliver as a government. Beyond this, to truly change our country for the better, we need a comprehensive legislative agenda. When Parliament meets for the first time, I will indeed present the National Assembly and Senate with a detailed program of government that will outline the bills that we intend to pass in order to implement the policy agenda outlined in this manifesto. On March 4th, ladies and gentlemen, we will begin our voyage to reach the new Kenya. For those Kenyans who vote for me, and equally for those who don't, we will work tirelessly over the next 5 years to earn your respect, your trust, and indeed your faith. I understand I will be judged by what I accomplish for you and not by what I simply promised. The mistakes of the past, ladies and gentlemen, will not be repeated. And at the end of my presidency, I welcome that judgment. The journey, ladies and gentlemen, has been long, and the tide has very often been against us at times. The waves have been very high and dangerous, but ladies and gentlemen, we have stayed true to our course. We have also, but only one choice. Do we go forward or do we go back? Forward. Do we embrace hope and change and sail on or do we cling to fear and division? Good one. I believe that however treacherous the seas, the Kenyan people know the way that we must take. I believe that with God's grace and with the strength, ingenuity, and determination of our people, we will and can arrive safely at our journey's end. The burden of carrying Kenya forward has fallen on the shoulders of the Jubilee generation. We have, ladies and gentlemen, the drive to take Kenya forward. We have the vigor and the strength to carry Kenya forward. We have the ideas, ladies and gentlemen, and innovation to see us through. We are ready to work. We can make it work because we believe. Indeed, yes, we do believe in Kenya. God bless you all. God bless Kenya. And forward, forward, forward.